My name is Haley, and I was 28 years old when I learned a hard lesson. On Christmas morning, my parents gave my sister a $65,000 BMW with a big red bow. The kind of car that says "We love you." My gift was a single dollar. A cruel joke that said, "You're an afterthought." I was so angry, so hurt, I just walked out. But what they didn't know was that their precious Christmas gift was in my name, and I had just signed off on the biggest secret that would change all of our lives forever. When my mom called, her voice shaking with panic, begging me to come back and fix it, I knew exactly what they had done. They had no idea that I had already taken the one thing they couldn't live without. So how did a single dollar bring a family to its knees? Let me tell you how some gifts are meant to break you, and how I took control of a twisted game and won. Let me take you back to where it began. It all started on that Christmas morning in the living room of my parents' house in Portland. I was sitting on the hardwood floor of my parents' living room in Portland, the torn wrapping paper a scattered sea around me. The air smelled of gingerbread and the artificial pine from the Christmas tree, the kind that came from a box in the garage. My sister Kendall was twirling a set of shiny BMW keys on her finger, the metal catching the twinkling lights from the tree, as she pranced around like she was 21 again. "I can't believe it," she squealed, bouncing on her toes. My own Beamer, my dad beamed at her with a kind of unfiltered pride I'd never seen him direct at me. My mom clasped her hands beneath her chin like she was witnessing a miracle instead of just another display of favoritism. The car sat in the driveway, a glossy white testament to parental devotion, complete with an enormous red bow that probably cost more than my entire Christmas budget. It was a brand new 2024 BMW X5, a beautiful beast of a vehicle. I knew, because I'd researched it for them, of course. My dad had a way of making me his unofficial assistant for anything that required research and practical planning. I'd given them 3 options, and they'd picked the most expensive one. Meanwhile, I stared at the object in my lap, a small square envelope. The paper was cheap, the kind you buy in a 10-pack at the corner store. "Open it," Mom urged, her voice a little too cheerful. My fingers felt numb as I complied. Inside was a generic gift card. I turned it over in my hand. $1 single dollar. The kind of card you'd throw away without a second thought, but here it was my Christmas gift. It felt like a sick joke, but nobody was laughing. My dad cleared his throat, a sound I knew meant he was about to say something he thought was profoundly wise. "It's the start of your future home fund, honey. You're always so responsible with money, unlike some people." He winked at Kendall, who pretended to look offended. Kendall dropped onto the couch beside me. "Dad, don't be mean." She giggled, not in the least bit bothered. "Besides, Haley has her dream job as a senior structural engineer. She doesn't need a car. I do. All my clients expect me to drive something a little more stylish than my old hatchback." That was the thing, they always had an excuse. Kendall needed a stylish car for her graphic design clients, but I was the one with a demanding job at a large firm traveling to project sites every other week. My 7-year-old Toyota, with over 200,000 miles on it, had seen better days. But I was the one who was responsible. My dad had always praised my responsibility, but it never felt like a compliment. It felt like an excuse to give me less. I was the one who had to be practical, the one who had to save for my own future. I had come here this morning with a few things I was excited to tell them. I was about to be promoted to project manager, a huge step in my career. I'd even bought them tickets for a trip to see the Grand Canyon, but none of it seemed to matter. They just wanted me to be the responsible older sister, the quiet one, the one who was a grown-up and didn't need anything. It was a role I'd been playing my whole life. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, until Mom decided to fill it with her usual brand of nervous chatter. "Haley, honey, don't look so sad. We know you're happy for Kendall. It's just a little something for you to start with." I looked down at the gift card in my hand, then at the beautiful wrapping paper, the expensive red bow, and the pure joy on Kendall's face. My heart ached not with sadness, but with a sudden searing clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. This was a statement, one they'd been making my entire life. I had always been the backup plan. The sensible one. The one who could be trusted with a $1 gift card while the showstopper went to someone else. In that moment, everything snapped into focus. All the times I'd had to cancel plans to pick Kendall up from a party. All the times I'd had to lend her money for her business ventures that never panned out. The times I'd had to mediate a fight between her and our parents because she was being emotional. I was tired of being the responsible one. I was tired of being the invisible one. I stood up slowly, the cheap little card still clutched in my hand. "I need to go for a walk," I said, my voice quiet and steady. Mom's smile faltered. "But honey, we haven't had Christmas lunch yet." I didn't answer. I just walked to the coat closet, pulled on my jacket, and grabbed my car keys. I heard Kendall call my name, a hint of concern in her voice for the first time all day, but I didn't turn back. I just walked out the door and into the cold Portland morning. I left behind a beautiful new car, a home full of family, and a role I no longer wanted to play. The air outside was sharper than I'd expected, the cold a clean shock against the messy warmth I had just left. I fumbled for my car keys in the pocket of my jeans and unlocked my old Toyota. It was a faithful car, a hand-me-down from my grandparents that I'd bought from them for $2,000 a few years ago. It had over 200,000 miles on it, and the upholstery smelled faintly of old coffee and stale snacks, but it was mine. I started the engine, the familiar groan of the starter motor, a welcome sound, and pulled out of the driveway. I didn't look in my rearview mirror as I drove away. I didn't need to. I knew what I would see. The shimmering white car with its big red bow, a symbol of everything I'd been denied. My GPS asked for a destination, and for a moment I didn't know what to tell it. My home was 3 states away, a small apartment in Seattle that I had worked 2 jobs to afford. But I couldn't go there. Not yet. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. I needed to keep moving. My thumb hovered over the phone, and then I found Chloe's name. My best friend since college, a fellow structural engineer, the one person who always knew what I was thinking before I even said it. I called her, and she picked up on the 3rd ring. "Haley, what's going on? You sound different," she said, her voice full of concern. I just started talking. The words came spilling out of me like water from a broken dam. The BMW, the $1 gift card, the way they always treated me like the responsible one. The one who didn't need love or gifts. I told her I was in my car, that I'd left without saying goodbye. Chloe listened patiently, and when I finally ran out of breath, she was quiet for a moment. "Haley," she said, her voice gentle, "I'm so sorry. I know this is a lot. Listen, I have an idea. Don't go back to Seattle. Drive south. Come to San Francisco. You can stay with me for as long as you need. We can get you set up with a therapist. We can get you out of that car and into a real bed. You need a safe space right now." The suggestion was like a lifeline, a solid thing to hold on to in the middle of a storm. San Francisco, a new city, a new life. It sounded perfect. "I'll be there as soon as I can," I told her, my voice cracking with emotion. I set the GPS for San Francisco and watched the miles tick by. I drove for hours, the landscapes blurring into a wash of gray and green. I stopped at a gas station somewhere in Oregon to fill up the tank. I got a cup of coffee and a hot dog, the kind of meal you eat when you're on the run. The phone started ringing again. It was my mom. I ignored it. Then my dad. I ignored him too. Then a text from Kendall. "Haley, where are you? Mom and Dad are worried sick. Please call us." I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by a cold resolve. They weren't worried sick. They were worried because I wasn't there to fix things. I wasn't there to pretend everything was fine. I wasn't there to be their scapegoat. I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I decided to take action, something I had been putting off for a long time. I opened my phone and went to my banking app. I had a joint account with my parents and a credit card that they used for a lot of household expenses. I had let them do it because I trusted them, and they always said it was easier to manage. I also had my own separate checking and savings accounts. With shaking fingers, I began to close all of them down, including the joint accounts and the credit card. I blocked their numbers, all of them. My phone went silent. The emptiness was a relief. I got back in my car and kept driving. The silence felt good, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The sun began to set, painting the sky in a fiery blend of orange and red, the kind of dramatic colors you only see when you're on the move. I drove through the night, the highway, a long ribbon of black asphalt under the glow of my headlights. I thought about the $1 gift card in my pocket. It was still there, a symbol of their complete and utter dismissal of me. But it wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a catalyst. It was the thing that had finally pushed me over the edge, the thing that had made me realize that I was worth more than a single dollar. I was worth a new beginning. I was worth more than being the responsible sister, the good daughter. I was worth everything I had ever wanted, and I was going to get it. I wasn't going back. Not ever. The words echoed in my mind, a finality I had never felt before. Not ever. The highway was a long, dark ribbon of asphalt under my headlights. I drove all night, the silence of my phone a strange but welcome comfort. I stopped only for gas, my mind a blur of hurt anger and a surprising quiet sense of freedom. By the time the sun started to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange over the mountains, I was exhausted. I pulled into a diner somewhere in southern Oregon, a place called the Crossroads, the kind of place with a big neon sign and a waitress who called you honey. I ordered a cup of black coffee, strong and bitter, and sat at a booth by the window, watching the morning light creep across the parking lot. The waitress, an older woman named Carol, refilled my cup without me asking. "Long night, honey?" she asked gently. I just nodded, too tired to speak. She didn't press for more, just patted my shoulder and walked away. Her simple kindness was almost too much, a small gesture that made my throat tighten with emotion. I sat there for another hour, just sipping my coffee and watching the world wake up. I felt like a ghost, a person who had walked away from their old life and had not yet found their new one. The exhaustion finally caught up to me, a heavy blanket that settled over my shoulders. I got back in my car and drove for another 2 hours before pulling into a rest stop. I set my alarm for 3 hours and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up to the jarring sound of my phone ringing. It was a familiar number, but I had blocked it. Still, the call came through, a loud, demanding buzz that filled the car. I fumbled for the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. It was Mom. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. The screen kept lighting up with her name, a desperate series of calls that made my hands tremble. I looked at the missed calls from my dad, from Kendall, from a few other numbers I didn't recognize. They had left dozens of voicemails. My stomach was in knots, a familiar feeling of dread washing over me. Finally, the calls stopped. I sat there for a long moment, the silence as loud as the ringing had been. I knew I had to listen to the voicemails. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and hit play. The first few were from Kendall, tearful and confused. "Haley, where are you? Please call me back. Mom is freaking out. Please, we just want to know you're okay." Her voice was full of genuine concern, and a small part of me felt a pang of guilt. The next few were from my dad, his voice getting more and more frustrated with each message. "Haley, this is ridiculous. Pick up the phone, we're worried sick. Don't you know what you're doing to your mother? This is not okay." Then came my mom's voicemails, her voice a mix of fury and panic. "Haley, pick up. This is not funny. You are ruining Christmas. Your father is sick with worry. I can't believe you're doing this to us." Her voice cracked with what sounded like real distress. I almost believed her. Almost. I knew her better than that. This was an act, a performance designed to make me feel guilty and bring me back into the fold. The last voicemail was from my mom. Her voice was no longer pleading. It was cold, hard, and laced with a new kind of panic. "Haley, I don't know why you're doing this, but you have to understand something. The car, the BMW, it's in your name. We needed a better credit score to get the loan, and your dad handled it all. We thought you would be a good sport about it. But now the bank is calling, and your father is threatening to have your car towed if you don't come back and fix this. If you don't call me back, we're going to report that beautiful BMW stolen. Don't be a fool, Haley. Come back and do the right thing." My hands went numb, the phone slipping from my fingers. It hit the floor of the car with a soft thud. I sat there, staring at the empty road, the trees a blur of green and brown. A cold, hard realization settled in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't about love. It was never about love. This was about money. They didn't care about me. They just cared about what they could get from me. They had used me. And now they were trying to threaten me into coming back. But I wasn't coming back. Not ever. I had a new destination, San Francisco. And I wasn't going to let them stop me. That voicemail was the last time I felt that familiar mix of fear and obligation. The last time I would ever let them scare me into doing what they wanted. I deleted the message, all of them, and threw my phone onto the passenger seat. I didn't care about their threats anymore. I had one destination, one goal. San Francisco. I drove the rest of the day, the miles disappearing under my tires. The landscape changed, the green forests of Oregon giving way to the golden hills of California. By the time I reached the city, the sun was setting, painting the sky in a fiery blaze of orange and purple. The sight of the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance filled me with a sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. I had done it. I had escaped. I called Chloe, my voice thick with exhaustion and emotion. "I'm here," I said the words, a simple declaration of my new reality. She told me to pull into the parking lot of her apartment building and wait for her. She came down a few minutes later, her face full of a mixture of relief and concern. She hugged me tight, and for the first time since I left my parents' house, I felt a sense of peace. "Come on," she said, pulling me toward the elevator. "You look like you've been living in that car for a week." She wasn't wrong. I stumbled out of my car, my legs shaky, my head swimming from the lack of sleep. Chloe took my arm, guiding me into the elevator and up to her apartment. She had a small guest room set up for me, a clean bed with soft pillows and a down comforter. "Take a shower," she said, handing me a clean towel. "I'll order us a pizza. We can talk in the morning." I didn't argue. I went into the bathroom and stood under the hot spray, the water washing away the grime of the road and the last vestiges of my old life. When I got out, I felt like a different person. I put on a pair of Chloe's sweatpants and a t-shirt and went to the kitchen. She had a pizza box open on the counter, and the smell of pepperoni and cheese filled the air. She handed me a plate and a slice. I ate it like I hadn't had a proper meal in days. "So," she said, her voice gentle, "you want to talk about it?" I told her everything. The $1 gift card, the voicemails, the threat to report the car stolen. Chloe listened without interruption, her face a mask of quiet fury. "They used you," she said, her voice low. "They used your good credit to buy Kendall a car, and then they had the audacity to threaten you with it." "That's what I don't get," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I worked my whole life to be the responsible one. I was the one who paid for my own college, the one who worked my way up the ladder, the one who bought her own car. And for what? So they could use me as their personal bank. They saw a good thing, and they took it." Chloe said, her voice hard. "That's what people like that do. But you're here now. You're safe. We'll figure this out. I'm not going to do anything," I said, the words surprising even myself. "I'm not going to get a lawyer. I'm not going to call them back. They made their bed, now they can lie in it." Chloe looked at me, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "Good," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That's the Haley I know." The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed for the first time in what felt like forever. Chloe and I went to a small coffee shop in the neighborhood. We sat outside sipping our lattes and watching the city come to life. I felt a sense of calm, a peace I hadn't felt in years. "You know," Chloe said, "my old firm is hiring. They're looking for a senior structural engineer. You should apply." I hadn't even thought about a job. I was still in survival mode. But the idea of a new job, a new life, a fresh start filled me with a sense of excitement. "I'll think about it," I said. "Don't think," Chloe said. "Do." I spent the next few days in a haze of phone calls and emails. I applied for the job at Chloe's firm and a few others. I sent out my resume, my cover letter, my portfolio. I called the corporate office of my old firm and told them I wanted to transfer to the San Francisco office. They were happy to oblige. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood a few blocks from Chloe's. It was tiny, but it was mine. I signed the lease, paid the deposit, and started to move my few belongings in. I was finally building a life of my own, a life on my own terms, a life without them. Moving into my own apartment felt like a symbolic act, a line I was drawing in the sand. I was officially a resident of San Francisco, a city that felt a million miles away from the life I had known. The first few weeks were a blur of work and unpacking. I was starting my new job as a senior structural engineer at a different company, and the work was demanding. It was a welcome distraction, a way to keep my mind occupied and my hands busy. I was good at my job. It was something I could be proud of, something they had no part in. Chloe was a lifesaver. She helped me unpack my boxes, she took me to her favorite restaurants, and she even gave me a list of therapists she recommended. "You've been through a lot, Haley," she said, her voice gentle. "It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to get help." I hesitated. I had always been the strong one, the one who didn't need help. But I knew she was right. I couldn't just bury all of this. It was a wound that needed to heal. I made an appointment with a Dr. Carter, a therapist with a practice in the city. The first session was hard. I sat in a comfortable chair, the sun streaming through the window, and I told her my story. Not the story of the $1 gift card and the BMW, but the real story. The story of a little girl who always felt like she had to be perfect to be loved. The story of a teenager who had to pay for her own college while her sister was handed everything. The story of a woman who had spent her entire life trying to be the person her parents wanted her to be, only to realize that they would never be satisfied. Dr. Carter listened patiently, and when I was done, she didn't offer any easy answers. "Haley," she said, her voice calm and kind. "You've been living in a cycle of codependency for a very long time. You've been the rescuer. You've been trying to save them from themselves, but you can't. And in the process, you've lost yourself." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. The rescuer. That's exactly what I was. I always had to be the responsible one, the one who fixed everything. The one who was there to pick up the pieces when Kendall's latest business venture fell apart. The one who had to mediate a fight between my parents and Kendall because my sister was being emotional. I went home that night and sat on the floor of my new apartment, a blank notebook in my lap. I started writing. Not a journal, but a list. A list of all the times I had been the rescuer. All the times I had sacrificed my own happiness for theirs. The list went on and on. My 18th birthday when I got $100 for my future, while Kendall got a new laptop. My college graduation when I got a handshake, while Kendall got a trip to Europe. My first job promotion when I got a pat on the back while Kendall got a new apartment. It was a pattern, a series of betrayals, a lifetime of being second best. The writing was cathartic, a way to release all the anger and resentment I had been holding on to for so long. It was also a way to see the truth. I wasn't the one who was wrong. I wasn't the one who was crazy. I was just a person who had been trying to get water from a well that had long since run dry. I started a new hobby, something that was just for me, something that had nothing to do with my parents or my job or my past. I found a pottery class at a local studio. The first night I was there, I was a mess. My hands were covered in clay, and my pots looked more like misshapen lumps of mud, but there was something so simple, so freeing about it. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just trying to create something. That's where I met Liam. He was in my class, a kind and quiet man, with a gentle smile and a love for creating beautiful things. He was a landscape architect, and he told me he loved working with his hands. We talked for hours that night, and I felt a connection with him that I had never felt with anyone before. He didn't ask me about my past. He didn't ask me about my family. He just listened. He was a breath of fresh air, a person who saw me for who I was not, for who I was supposed to be. I started looking forward to my pottery class every week, not just for the art, but for the company. My pottery class was a sanctuary, a place where the world outside seemed to fade away. It was more than just a hobby. It was a time to be with Liam, a kind and quiet man who made me feel seen, without having to say a single word. Our conversations were simple at first, about the best way to center clay on the wheel, or how to get the perfect glaze. But slowly, over time, they began to deepen. He told me about his work as a landscape architect, about his love for creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional. He talked about his passion for hiking in the mountains, about the quiet peace he found in nature. I found myself opening up to him in ways I never thought I would. I talked about my life in Seattle, about my old job, about the things I loved. I never mentioned my family, but I felt a strong pull to be completely honest with him. I wanted him to know the whole story, the good and the bad. One night as we were packing up our tools, I found myself telling him a little more. I had to leave my old life behind. I said the words, a simple confession. It wasn't serving me anymore. It was toxic. He just nodded, his gaze steady and calm. I get that. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to get to the other side. It's a scary thing, but it's also the bravest thing you can do. His words were so simple, so profound. They were exactly what I needed to hear. He understood. He didn't judge me. He just accepted me for who I was, a person who had walked away from everything she had ever known to find herself. That night we talked for hours, the rain, a steady rhythm against the window. We talked about our dreams, our fears, our pasts, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly seen. My life in San Francisco began to take shape. My apartment was no longer just a place to sleep. It was my home. I decorated it with plants and paintings, and I filled it with the things that made me happy. My job was a challenge, but I was good at it. I was promoted to a senior project manager, a role that was demanding but fulfilling. It was a validation of all my hard work, a testament to the person I had become. I hadn't talked to my family in months. I had blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. I had severed all ties. The silence was deafening at first, a constant reminder of the life I had left behind, but over time it became a welcome peace. I learned to live without the constant fear of a phone call, without the dread of a text message. I learned to breathe again. My relationship with Liam deepened. He was kind, patient, and he never pushed me to talk about things I wasn't ready to share. He was just there for me, a quiet, reassuring presence in my life. We went on hikes in the hills, we explored the city's hidden gems, and we spent quiet nights in watching movies and just being together. I felt a sense of calm and happiness that I had never felt before. I was finally building a life that was my own, on my own terms. A life without them. One evening, as I was working on a report, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer it, but a strange sense of curiosity made me pick up. "Hello," I said. "Haley. It's your cousin Madison. I know this is a little random, but I was wondering if you'd be able to make it to my wedding. It's going to be at the Magnolia Gardens in Portland. My parents would be so happy if you were there." My heart stopped. Portland. The one place I had been avoiding since I left. The one place I knew I would have to face my family. The invitation felt like a test, a challenge I had to face. My mind raced with a million different thoughts. What if they tried to corner me? What if they tried to manipulate me again? What if they tried to get me to pay for the BMW? I had so many questions, so many fears, but I also had a newfound sense of strength. I wasn't the same person who had left Portland all those months ago. I was stronger. I was smarter. I was no longer a victim. I knew I had to go back. I had to face them. I had to prove to myself that I was strong enough to face them on my own terms. I had to show them that I was no longer the person they had used and abused. I had to go back and show them who I had become. I had to show them that I was no longer their problem to solve. I was my own person, and I was going to show them that I was not a doll to be played with. I was a force to be reckoned with. I hung up the phone with Madison, my heart pounding in my chest. I had just agreed to go back to Portland, the city I had run away from just months ago. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and excitement. I was scared, yes, but I was also ready. I was no longer that scared little girl who had left her family's house in the middle of the night. I was a woman who had built a new life, a new career, a new sense of self. I was strong. I was a force to be reckoned with. I called Liam, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement. "I have to go back to Portland," I said, the words a confession. "My cousin Madison is getting married. I have to go." He was quiet for a moment and I could feel his concern through the phone. "Haley," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you sure you don't have to do this? You can just stay here with me. We can go to Napa instead. We can do anything you want." "No," I said, my voice firm. "I have to do this. I have to face them. I have to show them who I am now. I'm not going to let them win. I'm not going to let them get to me." "Then I'm coming with you," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You're not doing this alone." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I didn't have to face them alone. I had Liam by my side, and I knew that with him I could do anything. We booked a hotel room in downtown Portland, a beautiful place with a view of the river. I refused to stay at my parents' house, of course. I wasn't going to let them think they still had a hold on me. I wanted to show them that I was a woman who was in charge of her own life. The drive to Portland was quiet. We talked about everything and nothing. Liam played some music and I just looked out the window watching the familiar landscape go by. I felt a strange sense of calm, a peace that I hadn't expected. I was ready. I was prepared. I had my armor on and I wasn't going to let them break through. When we arrived at the hotel, I was surprised to see a text from my mom. "Haley, I heard you were in town. Why don't you come over for dinner? I made your favorite spaghetti." The text was so normal, so casual, as if nothing had happened between us, as if I hadn't left without a word, as if they hadn't threatened to report a brand new BMW stolen. I didn't respond. I just deleted the text and blocked her number again. I wasn't going to fall for their tricks again. The next day we went to the wedding. It was a beautiful affair held at the Magnolia Gardens, a stunning place with a large pond and a beautiful rose garden. I was a little nervous, my hands clammy, and my heart pounding in my chest. But when I saw Liam standing there in his suit, his face calm and reassuring, I felt a sense of peace. I was ready. We walked in together hand in hand, and I felt a million eyes on me. I saw my aunts and uncles, my cousins, all the people I had grown up with. They all looked at me with a strange mixture of curiosity and pity. I ignored them, all my eyes scanning the crowd for my family. I saw them sitting at a table in the back. My dad looked older, his hair grayer, his face a little more tired. My mom looked thinner, her eyes a little sadder. And Kendall, my beautiful, irresponsible sister, was not in a BMW. She was sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize, looking tired and a little worn out. I walked over to my cousin and hugged her, congratulating her on her beautiful wedding. She introduced me to her husband, a kind and quiet man who smiled at me. I introduced her to Liam, and she looked at him with a little bit of surprise in her eyes. "Haley," she said, her voice a little too loud. "I'm so glad you could make it. We were all so worried about you." I just smiled and told her I was happy to be there. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing that I had been running from my family. I was just going to be myself. I spent the next hour mingling, making small talk with my cousins, my aunts and uncles. I talked about my job, about San Francisco, about my love for pottery. I was a different person and I could see the confusion in their eyes. They were used to the quiet, introverted Haley who was always in the background. But this Haley was confident, self-assured, and a little bit dangerous. I was no longer a ghost at my own family gatherings. I was a person, a real, living, breathing person. I saw my parents and Kendall sitting at a table in the back, their heads close together. They were talking in hushed tones, their faces a mask of worry and concern. I felt a strange sense of detachment, a quiet satisfaction. It was a kind of sweet justice to see them so worried, so concerned about something they couldn't control. I caught my mom's eye and she gave me a weak, fake smile. I didn't smile back. I just looked at her, my face, a blank mask. She looked away, her face a little paler than before. I walked over to the buffet table, Liam by my side, and filled my plate with some of the food. I saw my Aunt Marie, my mom's sister, standing by the table, a strange look of pity in her eyes. She was a kind woman, but she was also a gossip. I knew she was dying to know what had happened. She looked at me, then at Liam, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Haley," she said, her voice a hushed whisper. "I can't believe it. You've brought a man to a family wedding. Your mother must be thrilled." I just smiled. We're very happy, I said. She leaned in closer, her voice even softer. Haley, she said. I'm so sorry. I know what happened. Your mother told me everything. She's just so worried about you. I'm fine, Aunt Marie, I said, my voice calm and steady. I'm more than fine. She shook her head. No, honey, I mean with the car. Your sister's car. The BMW. I heard she had to sell it. Your mom said there was a problem with the loan. Something about a credit check. They had to sell the house too. They're living in an apartment now. It's a real shame. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The house. They had to sell the house. My parents' dream home, the one they had worked their whole lives for. The one they had given Kendall and me so many memories in. They were living in an apartment now. I felt a strange mix of emotions. A small part of me felt a sense of victory, of sweet, sweet revenge. But a larger part of me just felt a sense of emptiness. They had lost everything, and for what? For a brand new car and a life they couldn't afford. It was a tragedy, a sad and pathetic end to a story that had begun with so much promise. I looked over at Kendall's table. She was talking to the man I had seen her with earlier. He looked like a kind, quiet man, but she was a different person. She looked exhausted, her face pale, her eyes tired. She wasn't the vibrant, carefree girl she used to be. The BMW was gone, and with it the life she had always taken for granted. I felt a pang of pity for her, a small, tiny sliver of empathy for the girl who had always been so lucky. But I quickly pushed it away. She was an adult. She had made her own choices. She had to live with the consequences. I walked back to my table, my plate full of food I suddenly had no appetite for. I sat down beside Liam, my hand in his. What's wrong? He asked, his voice gentle. Nothing, I said, my voice a whisper. Everything. They had to sell the house. They had to sell the BMW. They're living in an apartment now. He just nodded, his face a mask of understanding. Haley, he said, his voice quiet. You didn't do this. They did this to themselves. You just stopped them from doing it to you. His words were a comfort, a quiet reassurance that I hadn't gone too far. I hadn't been the villain in this story. I had just been the one who had finally had enough. I looked back at my parents and Kendall still sitting at their table, their faces etched with worry. I realized that this was it. This was their karma. This was their consequence. They had always taken from me, and now they had nothing left to take. I was no longer their victim. I was no longer their scapegoat. I was a person who had found her own way, her own happiness, her own life, and there was nothing they could do to stop me. There was a strange sense of peace that settled over me, a quiet calm that replaced the anxiety and anger I had been carrying for so long. My hand was in Liam's, his presence, a comforting weight beside me. I looked at my parents and Kendall still huddled together at their table, and I felt nothing but a quiet sense of detachment. I was no longer a part of their story. I was the author of my own. A few minutes later, as I was talking to my cousin Madison, my mom approached me, a forced smile on her face. Haley, honey, she said, her voice a little too sweet. We need to talk. My dad and Kendall were right behind her, their faces grim. Privately, my mom added, her eyes darting around the room. I looked at Liam and he gave my hand a gentle squeeze. I'll be right here, he whispered. I gave him a small smile and followed my family into a quiet corner of the library where they had been holding the cocktail hour. The room was empty now, the tables and chairs, a silent audience to the confrontation that was about to unfold. I stood there, my hands clasped in front of me, my back straight, my chin held high. I was no longer a little girl begging for love. I was a woman who was in charge of her own life. My dad started first, his voice low and full of a quiet authority. Haley, we need to talk. You've hurt us. You've hurt your mother. You've hurt Kendall. You've hurt the whole family. You have to understand that this behavior is not acceptable. You just can't run away from your problems. And you have to understand that you are the problem, I said, my voice calm and steady. My words hit them like a slap in the face. My dad's eyes widened in surprise and my mom's face went pale. Kendall just stood there, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes blazing with a familiar fury. How can you say that, Kendall? said her voice, a hushed hiss. You're the one who ruined everything. You're the one who just left without a word. You're the one who didn't come to Thanksgiving or Christmas. I was not at our family Christmas because I was tired of being treated like an afterthought, I said, my voice firm. I was tired of being the responsible one while you were being the irresponsible one. I was tired of being the one who had to fix everything. My mom stepped forward, her hands on her hips. Haley, honey, you're not making sense. We just want to talk to you. We're a family. We need to be able to talk to each other. Don't you know what you're doing to your father? My father, who had been standing there silently, finally spoke. Haley, he said, his voice quiet. We just want to fix this. We want to be a family again. We want you to come home. I looked at them, my heart pounding in my chest. They were trying to manipulate me. They were trying to make me feel guilty. They were trying to pull me back into the old cycle. But I wasn't going to let them. I took a deep breath and looked at them, my eyes filled with a new kind of resolve. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. I set it down on the table, the sound of the paper against the wood, echoing in the quiet room. I didn't come here to talk, I said, my voice low and steady. I came here to show you something, and I came here to tell you that I'm done. I'm done being your scapegoat. I'm done being the person you can always count on to fix your messes. I'm done being the person you use and abuse. My mom's face went from pale to white. My dad just stood there, his face a mask of disbelief. Kendall looked at the folder, her eyes wide, with a strange mix of fear and curiosity. I unclasped the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. I laid them out on the table one by one. The deed to my apartment, the deed to my car, my bank statements, my credit score, everything. This is me, I said, my voice a quiet roar. This is the person you wanted to be, the person you wanted me to be. The person who was responsible, who was hardworking, who was successful, the person you used and abused. And I'm not that person anymore. I'm the person who is in charge of her own life. The person who is not afraid to walk away. The person who is no longer your victim. The air in the room was thick with tension, a suffocating silence that was broken only by the sound of my breathing. My family stood there, their faces a mix of disbelief, anger, and a quiet, terrible understanding. They had come here to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty. But I had come here to tell them the truth, and the truth I knew was a far more powerful weapon than any lie they could ever tell. I laid the manila folder on the table between us, a small gesture that carried the weight of my entire life. My parents and Kendall just stared at it, their faces a mixture of disbelief and a quiet building rage. They had no idea what was inside, but they knew it wasn't a peace offering. I didn't say anything. I just reached in and pulled out the first document. It was a copy of my college tuition statement and a bank statement showing the payments coming directly from my personal savings account. My parents had paid for Kendall's tuition in full, but they had always told me I had to take care of my own. I had worked 2 jobs all through college to make sure I graduated debt-free. I paid for my own college, I said, my voice low and steady. Every single penny. You told me it was a lesson in responsibility. You told me that I had to learn how to be an adult. Meanwhile, you were paying for Kendall's tuition, her apartment, her car. You gave her everything, and you gave me a $1 gift card. My mom's face went from pale to white. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. My dad's eyes were fixed on the documents, his face a mask of disbelief. Kendall just stood there, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes blazing with a familiar fury. I didn't let them interrupt me. I just kept going. I pulled out another document. It was a copy of my credit card statements from years ago, showing the payments I had made to help Kendall when she couldn't pay her bills. I paid for her credit card debt when she went on a shopping spree in Paris, I said, my voice rising a little. I paid for her apartment when she lost her job. I paid for her car insurance. I was always there to bail her out. And for what? So you could tell me how responsible I was. So you could tell me how proud you were of me. You were proud of me for being a fool. You were proud of me for letting you use me. Kendall finally found her voice. That's not fair. I needed your help. You were my sister, she said, her voice a hushed hiss. And you were my sister too, I said, my voice firm. But you never asked me how I was, you never asked me if I needed help. You just took and took and took until there was nothing left to take. I pulled out another document. This one was a copy of my phone records, showing all the calls and text messages they had sent me over the past few months. I laid it on the table, a testament to their endless calls and endless lies. I'm not a fool, I said, my voice calm and steady. I know why you called. I know why you left all those voicemails. You didn't care about me. You didn't care if I was okay. You just cared about what I could do for you. You just cared about the fact that I had cut off your source of money. You just cared about the fact that you had no way to pay for that car. You used me. You used my good credit. You used my good nature. You used me like a credit card. My mom finally found her voice. It was a hushed whisper full of a strange mix of anger and defeat. How can you say that we're your parents? We love you. We just wanted to do what was best for you. No, I said, my voice a quiet roar. You didn't do what was best for me. You did what was best for you. You wanted a daughter who was a doormat. You wanted a daughter who would always be there to clean up your messes. You wanted a daughter who would always say yes. And I'm not that person anymore. I'm the person who is in charge of her own life. The person who is not afraid to walk away. The person who is no longer your victim. I reached into my purse and pulled out one last thing. It was a small, worn photograph. It was a picture of me when I was 7 years old holding a small doll. It was the one thing I had ever truly loved as a child, the one thing that was truly mine. I placed it on the table right next to the documents. This is me, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. This is the little girl who just wanted to be loved. The little girl who just wanted to be seen. The little girl who was willing to do anything to get your attention. But I learned something. I learned that you can't buy love, you can't earn love, and you can't get love from people who don't know how to give it. The air in the room was thick with tension, a suffocating silence that was broken only by the sound of my breathing. My family stood there, their faces a mix of disbelief, anger, and a quiet, terrible understanding. They had come here to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty. But I had come here to tell them the truth. And the truth, I knew, was a far more powerful weapon than any lie they could ever tell. The truth hung in the air, a thick, suffocating weight that settled over all of us. My parents and Kendall just stared at the documents, at the photographs, at the evidence of their lies. My mom's face was a mask of disbelief. My dad's eyes were filled with a strange mixture of anger and defeat. Kendall just stood there, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes blazing with a familiar fury. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The truth in all its brutal honesty had spoken for me. My mom finally found her voice. It was a hushed whisper full of a strange mix of anger and defeat. How can you say that we're your parents? We love you. We just wanted to do what was best for you. I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. You didn't do what was best for me. I said, my voice a quiet roar. You did what was best for you. You wanted a daughter who was a doormat. You wanted a daughter who would always be there to clean up your messes. You wanted a daughter who would always say yes. You wanted a daughter who was so desperate for your love that she would do anything to get it. But I'm not that person anymore. My mom started to cry, her tears a theatrical display I had seen 1,000 times before. Haley, please, she said, her voice a sob. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you felt this way. I don't know what to do. You need to get help, I said, my voice firm. All of you. You need to go to therapy. You need to talk to someone who isn't me. You need to figure out why you treat me like a bank account, and Kendall like a princess. You need to figure out why you think it's okay to use your own daughter for your own gain. You need to figure out why you think it's okay to lie to me. You need to figure out why you think it's okay to manipulate me. You need to figure out why you don't know how to love me without a price tag. My dad's face was a mask of disbelief. He looked at me, then at Kendall, then back at me. Haley, he said, his voice a quiet plea. We love you. We've always loved you. We just don't know how to show it. We're sorry. No, I said, my voice a whisper. You're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you lost control. You're sorry you're in a mess you can't get out of. You're sorry that you're facing the consequences of your own actions. You're not sorry for what you did to me. You're just sorry that you're paying the price. Kendall finally spoke, her voice a hushed hiss, full of a strange mix of anger and defeat. You're not being fair, Haley. We're a family. You can't just throw us away. You threw me away a long time ago, I said, my voice firm. You threw me away when you gave me a $1 gift card. You threw me away when you used my credit to buy a car for Kendall. You threw me away when you threatened to report it stolen. You threw me away when you made me feel like I was a fool for being a good person. You threw me away when you taught me that my value was based on what I could do for you, and now I'm throwing you away. I'm done being your victim. I'm done being your scapegoat. I'm done being the person you can always count on to fix your messes. I looked at all of them, my eyes filled with a new kind of resolve. I had a choice to make. I could stay and try to fix things, or I could walk away and never look back. I had been given a choice a long time ago, a choice between my own happiness and their toxic love. I had chosen their toxic love for so long, but not anymore. This is my final offer, I said, my voice low and steady. We will all go to therapy. We will all talk to a professional. We will all work on our relationship. We will all set boundaries. We will all learn how to respect each other. And if you can't do that, then I'm done. I'm done with all of you. I will walk away and you will never see me again. My mom looked at me, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of anger and fear. My dad just stood there, his face a mask of disbelief. Kendall's eyes were filled with tears. I had given them a choice. I had given them a chance. I had given them a way out. But I had also given them an ultimatum. It was up to them to decide what they were going to do. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked away. I left the documents on the table, a testament to the truth. I left my family in a state of shock, a state of disbelief, a state of fear. I walked out of the library and back into the wedding, into a new life. And I knew for the first time in my life that I was finally free. I turned and walked away, the words of my ultimatum echoing in the quiet room. I didn't look back. I just walked out of the library and back into the wedding, back into a life that was finally mine. I found Liam standing right where I had left him, his face a mask of concern. He didn't ask what had happened. He just took my hand, his touch a silent comfort, and led me out of the wedding, out of that suffocating space, and back into the fresh, cold air. We drove back to San Francisco in silence, the miles a quiet testament to the emotional journey I had just completed. I was exhausted, but I was also at peace. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of calm, a sense of quiet triumph. I had faced them, I had stood up to them, and I had won. The next few months were a blur of work and therapy. My sessions with Dr. Carter were a place of healing, a place where I could finally unpack all the years of pain, all the years of being second best. She helped me understand that I wasn't the one who was crazy. I wasn't the one who was wrong. I was just a person who had been living in a toxic environment, a person who had been trying to get love from a well that had long since run dry. I learned to love myself. I learned to trust myself. I learned that my value was not based on what I could do for other people. It was based on who I was. I was a person who was worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of happiness. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. My relationship with Liam deepened. He was my rock, my quiet strength, my partner in crime. We went on hikes in the mountains, we went to art galleries, we went to little cafes in the city. We talked about everything and nothing. He was a safe place, a person who loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for him. He was a person who loved me without a price tag. I learned that love was not something you had to earn. It was something that you just were. A year passed, and my life in San Francisco was thriving. I had a great job, a beautiful apartment, and a man who loved me. I had a life that was finally my own, a life that I had built from the ground up. I hadn't heard from my family in months. I had blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. I had severed all ties. The silence was a constant reminder of the life I had left behind. but it was also a constant reminder of the life I had built. One day, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. It was Kendall. "Haley," she wrote. "I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I'm taking a pottery class. It's helping me. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry." The text was simple, honest, and it felt so real. I didn't respond. I just looked at the picture she had sent me. It was a picture of a small, misshapen bowl. It was lopsided and a little crooked, but it was beautiful. It was a testament to her trying. A testament to her healing. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the picture, my heart filled with a strange mixture of hope and sadness. A few days later, I got a letter from my mom. It was a long, rambling letter full of apologies and explanations. She told me that she and my dad were in therapy. She told me that she was starting to understand. She told me that she was sorry. The letter was a beginning, a first step toward a new future. I didn't know if I could forgive them. I didn't know if I could ever trust them again, but I knew that I was finally free. I was no longer a pawn in their game. I was a person who was in charge of her own life. I know that my story is not unique. I know that so many of you have been through something similar. So many of you have been hurt by the people who were supposed to love you. So many of you have been used, abused, and betrayed. But I want you to know that you are not alone. And I want you to know that you are not a victim. You are a survivor. You are a person who is worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of happiness. You are a person who is in charge of your own life. You are a person who can walk away. You are a person who can build a new life, a new career, a new sense of self. My journey was long and hard, but it was worth it. I am not the same person who left my parents' house a year ago. I am a different person. I am a better person. I am a person who is in charge of her own life. I hope my story has given you some hope. I hope it has given you some comfort. I hope it has given you the courage to stand up for yourself, to walk away, to build a new life. And I hope you know that you are not alone. There are so many of us out there. So many of us who have been through this. So many of us who have come out on the other side. Please share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening.